thank you all for coming to our webinar for November on engaging partners on electric vehicles. We're really excited to have you all here today to discuss partnerships. So, per usual, if you could, I think you all already have it down, but if you haven't put the name of your community on your Zoom name, could you please do that now? To do that, there's just three dots in the right-hand corner of your Zoom picture, and you can select that to rename yourself to include the community that you're representing. And additionally, in the chat, if you would respond to the icebreaker question, which is who has been a successful partner in your community's EV work? So feel free to throw that in the chat today. We're interested to see who you've been working with and who's been really helpful in that work that you've been doing. And while you all work to type that in, I'll move on to our agenda for the day. Oh, I'm seeing some, the American Lung Association has been really helpful in events, as well as local utilities and Recharge Minnesota and Yucca Kukkonen. Yeah, those are all great partners. And the county as well. I think that's good to be looking for partners in all corners. So got to take advantage of the resources that are available to us. So on our agenda today, my colleague Mackenzie Love is on the call to talk a little bit about partners that we can engage with. And then Annette Kuyper from Wright-Hennepin Electric Co-op is here to give a presentation as well to talk about insights into engaging with the electric utility. And then we'll have a time for discussion and questions for both of our presenters and for each other. And then we will wrap up with a few next steps before heading out. So without further ado, I will pass it over to my colleague, Mackenzie Love. She is a senior program manager and transportation planner at Great Plains Institute and kind of recently joined, I would say. So I think maybe this is the first time that you all are getting a chance to meet Mackenzie and hear her present. So thank you for being with us here with us today, Mackenzie.
Thank you, Rebecca, and hello, everyone. As Rebecca didn't know, I'm new to the team, and I was absolutely thrilled to join the Great Plains Institute for many reasons, not least of which was the opportunity to work with you all on EV Smart. I think electrification has the potential to reduce the transportation sector impact on the environment, public health, and many other arenas, and have just such a wide-ranging impact on the way we move. But with that much potential, and of course, comes a similar level of complexity. It's such a big lift, and there's so many pieces of it that no one individual or entity can do it alone. And that's why working with EV Smart can be so powerful, and why we wanted to talk with you today about the importance of partnership in accelerating EV readiness. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a list of potential partners that we wanted to highlight today. I know you're already working with some of them because you're taking big steps here, but I wanted to talk about each of them and provide some examples of how you could get conversations started or keep them rolling. So with that, Rebecca, could you take us to the next slide? And great. Okay, the first group we wanted to talk about is your community decision makers. This can be your elected officials, informal leaders, or perhaps something, a board or an authority, any group that has the potential to make decisions that affect huge swaths of how your community will be moving forward. I assume most of you have already started these conversations, but it's also great to keep these kinds of tips in mind when you're continuing to reach out to those folks and keeping them engaged in something that will take some time, like the electrification process. So to first start any conversation, be it the first one or the 10th one. You can share some facts about electric vehicles or EVs, starting with their kind of market penetration and the impact they're having on the personal vehicle market. For example, it's estimated that EVs will surpass 1 million vehicles sold this year, which is an incredible number. But President Biden doesn't want to stop there. He has a goal for electric vehicle sales to comprise 50% of the personal vehicles sold in a year by 2030. So that's rather ambitious. And the bottom line here is EVs are coming whether we're ready or not. So let's go ahead and take some proactive action for them. Now, that's kind of an imperative or a call for action that you can share with your decision makers. But just like us, any imperative is stronger and more likely to be adopted when there's a personal tie or reason, a motivation to do something with it. And that's where you can bring in your community's vision or goals or other commitments. This could be tying it back to any sort of climate goals, public health goals, but also if your decision maker has a particular interest in increasing access to mobility or anything like that, taking a tie and drawing the clear line between electrification and that goal can really help create more motivated action. And it's good to remind them of that every time you engage, how important this is to the vision. That said, every goal and ambition needs a little bit of support, usually financially. And so it's important to highlight that there is the funding out there, both at the federal and the state level. There are many, many pots of funding, and just one of them, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is sometimes referred to as bill, has $7.5 billion in the bank for EV charging alone, as well as some other funding to support electrification in terms of supply chains and other aspects. So the funding's there. That said, it can be a little bit complicated to find where all of the funding resources are and how to apply for them. So you should let your decision makers know, and I hope that you know already, you have support through each other in your cohort here and through the EV Smart program team. So it's important to highlight that you can get assistance in whatever stage you're in of electrification. So again, create that imperative, tie it to a goal, let them know that there's funding out there and that you have support to pursue it and to think through all these complexities. And we'll see a similar pattern as we move through other partners as well. So Rebecca, if you could take us to the next slide. The next group that I wanted to talk about is business and property owners. Now, this group is external, of course, to your organization, but there's a lot for them to think about as we move towards electrification in terms of the infrastructure, policies, just a million little details. So we have put a couple of longer form resources on this slide. And I wanted to go ahead and let you know the slides will be shared with you after this presentation, so you can click on them and take a deeper dive. But really some high level points are electric EVSE or electric vehicle supply equipment can be much more cost efficient when it's installed at the construction point rather than retrofitting a building. So when you are going out to talk with these business and property owners about rental inspections or inspections for new businesses, go ahead and bring this topic up and let them know right off the bat what I mentioned before. Electric vehicles are coming to the market. It costs less to go ahead and get ready now. And then, follow that up with some motivating factors like 80% of charging happens at home or work. And that will give them kind of the motivation to meet that imperative. And you can also share with them any sort of incentives or resources you might already have on board. Sometimes it takes just a little bit of reminding folks that something is happening and then offering to support them in whatever way you can, be it a conversation or something as robust as an incentive. That can be enough to get these business and property owners to really start taking action in a meaningful way. And again, we will share these resources with you. And Rebecca, if you could move forward one more slide. The next group is someone that is potentially internal or external, depending on how your community is laid out. Your school district or your bus company has a big role to play in electrification. And the reason is that diesel buses create a huge amount of pollution that can often end up being localized around the bus itself. And this creates significant impacts on the students inside. It can impact their physical health, their mental well-being, and there has even been some research by the World Resource Institute, or WRI, showing that pollution from school buses, when it's mitigated by electrification, can lead to immediate and significant improvements in student test scores. So this is one area where you can really quickly make a significant impact for a lot of people. So there's a really strong reason to start the conversation with your school bus, at your school district, or your bus company as soon as possible. Now, that said, those buses are big and costly, but luckily there is funding out there. The EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, has a program every year to offer up to $375,000 per electric bus. And the applications for that are open right now through January 31st. And you can apply for funding for up to 10 buses. I will let you know that rural or underserved districts are prioritized, and that does apply to some communities in our region. We will have a link in this slide deck for you to be able to click and learn more about which districts are prioritized, and you'll want to look for EPA Region 5. If you don't remember that, we'll make sure to provide that information, or you can reach out to our staff at any time, but it should be on their on the EPA's website, and you'll get a link to that after this webinar. If you want to learn more about electrifying your buses or working with your school district, Cure MN is a nonprofit in the area that's working on rural social justice in particular. And they will be having a webinar all about school buses tomorrow. That is, I believe, free of cost to attend. And our colleague Lindsay sent you an email with how to register via email. And I will drop a link in that to that in the chat right after my presentation also. I think we have one more slide, two more slides. Rebecca, if you could take us to the next. But so the school buses are a great place to start. And they are an example of a fleet, but they are not the only fleet that you might have operating in your jurisdiction. You might have fleets for various departments throughout your city or your community, and it's important to work with both the fleet managers and the teams that maintain those fleets in moving towards electrification. The first thing you'll see on this slide is another resource prepared by another team within GPI. And the reason we wanted to share that, it was prepared for the Metropolitan Council, but it has some really great insights that go even beyond the reach of that of the council itself. For example, many of the concerns of fleet managers or maintenance teams have to do with the capacity of the vehicles. Do they have enough power to do what our application is? Do they have enough cargo space? How much charging will they need, and do we have the capacity for it? And the study that we've linked that was prepared for the Metropolitan Council actually answers some of those questions by addressing each need individually and providing examples of specific makes and models of vehicles that can be used to address those needs. So it is a snapshot in time about the details on those vehicles, but it's a great start jumping off place, and it's a great kind of proof of concept to show that there are vehicles out there that can satisfy nearly every fleet need that a community may have. So I'd encourage you to check that out. It's in beautiful tables and laid out very nicely. But when you do start those conversations with the teams themselves, you can share that information with them, but you should also tout the potential benefits that they might see in making this change, because it will be significant. They could see increased fuel efficiency, decreased maintenance, and of course, the environmental benefits that your community may be working towards as a whole, and thus setting goals for their teams. But you also have to acknowledge the potential concerns that they might have around workforce implications, range anxiety, being how far can I drive this vehicle before I need to charge it, and inventory needs. For example, will they need to stock different parts when they are preparing for the maintenance logs for those vehicles in their shops, or will they need to work with a different supplier or maintenance provider to maintain the fleets? And those are kind of policy decisions that you'll need to have with your fleet managers and your community decision makers. And so it's important to acknowledge those and be willing to have an open conversation about them, and also share that you have access to research and best practices and support through things like EV Smart that you can use to inform those conversations and hopefully come to decisions that work for everyone and help accelerate EV readiness across your community, even with when these concerns are present. And I think we have one more group to talk about, Rebecca, if you can move us forward. The next group has to do with a more public facing, a more general populace facing partner, and those are your transit or rideshare and car share providers. These services all address large swaths of your population at once and provide mobility options for those who don't have a single occupancy vehicle or a vehicle or would prefer not to use one. And they can already be an environmentally beneficial mode of transportation, but we can take that even a little bit further when they are electrified. For transit, of course, that can have huge impacts, but due to the number of riders that it serves. But if you do not have transit or you're looking to help people make the first and last mile connections to and from transit, your car share and ride share can be a great option, and those can be electrified as well. Now, ride share can be things like Uber or Lyft or other transportation network companies where you have a driver that comes to pick you up. And those some of those car ride share companies do have electrification programs or incentives or options you can select. And car share is when you have cars parked usually in the right of way that folks can pick up at point A and take to any point B they choose within a service area. And there are some providers that are starting to make great progress in electrifying those systems as well. For example, there's Our Car in the Twin Cities. You might not have access to car share, ride share right now, but these are becoming more viable solutions. And so it's a great time to start laying the groundwork for conversations about perhaps engaging a provider to come to your community in the future if you don't already have access. And as I mentioned, they can serve as an alternative when you have areas that are underserved by transit, or you need to make those connections to your transit system, and they can be a great supplement and work together. Now, when you do get to the transit piece itself, or if that's relevant, a couple of things do need to be addressed early on. We could talk about the charging capacity of your grid to support those large vehicles, and that should start with a conversation with your utility and your transit provider. But you also need to think about the fleet composition. Do you have body on chassis vehicles, or do you have the full scale buses or perhaps articulated buses, and how do their charging demands or needs differ? And you also should think about which routes might be appropriate for electrification in terms of their geography, but also their length of service per day. How many hours is that bus or other type of vehicle on the road before it can get to another place to charge? And the physical length of its route will also impact how long before it can get back to a charging station. And those are key things to keep in mind when you're picking which routes to start electrifying first. You want to give them the most advantageous and receptive routes to make them successful, so you can start building towards removing any sort of barriers for those longer routes. But starting with the routes and lines that are most lend themselves towards electrification can pave a way for full electrification if that is the goal of your community. So really with all of these partners, it's important to kind of create an imperative and show the reason for why you're asking them to make such a big change. Give them a motivation. For some reason, they can feel connected to the goal of making that change. For example, tying it back to their vision or the benefits to your community. Acknowledging any concerns they may have and offering to have open conversations about how to address them with leadership. And then offering to share any resources that you have access to through your own research. I know that you all are committed to this. You've probably got things in your back pocket and the support that you get through programs like EV Smart to keep everyone at the table and to get them to the table in the first place. With that, I think I'll hand it over to Annette for our next presentation. She really has some great expertise about this and doing this type of work on a regular basis. And I'm just so pleased that you were able to join us today, Annette, to continue this conversation.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, everyone, for letting me sit in on your meeting today. My name's Annette Kuyper. I'm the Community Relations and Beneficial Electrification Director for Wright-Hennepin. And we're a cooperative. I'll show you who we are in the next couple slides. And then I just wanted to kind of share some of our EV outreach best practices that we've been learning from, and we've been doing in the last year or so. And maybe there's some best practices you can take from what we've been doing over here at Wright-Hennepin. So next slide. So Wright-Hennepin, I'm speaking to you from our headquarters in Rockford. And oh, I guess it's the one after that. There's a picture of a EV, yeah. We're in Rockford, Minnesota. We're the 4th largest cooperative in Minnesota. We have almost 59,000 consumers. We have about 150 employees, a large employer in Rockford area. And the Public Utilities Commission has put out a report in January. We have about just over 1,200 members who have electric vehicles, and we have 633 of them participating on an EV program, which is what we would like them to do. So I'm going to talk more about that. Next slide shows kind of our districts that we have in our service area. We're run by board members. We're owned by our members. So we're very cognizant on providing energy, cost-effective energy to our members, and making sure that they are, someone who has an EV is not being detrimental to someone who does not choose to have an EV, so that we're making sure that our members who are owners are getting the most benefit from our electrical provider. Next slide. So 2 years ago, we started really looking at EVs. An EV in a home increases the energy load by 30%. So we really needed to look as a utility into all of these areas to take a look at our EV programs that we offer, kind of what's happening in public policy. So as you can see, all the variety of areas that we had to look at internally. We actually formed an EV working group inside Wright-Hennepin with anybody from operations to our engineering department to our member services that was working on EV initiatives. And this is an opportunity for us to have an internal committee that is making sure that we're reducing redundancy. We're hearing about each other's projects in regard to our EV initiatives. And we're giving input to each other from the different levels of expertise we have from our own employees internally. Today, I'm going to focus on the communication and outreach side, but I'm happy if anybody ever wants to learn about our other initiatives, I'm happy to share that at another time. So next slide. So I'm speaking to the choir here, definitely is something that we need to be prepared for, the growth of EVs. We're definitely in a demographic area that has EV members that are purchasing EVs in our area, with us being Wright County and Western Hennepin County. And we just, again, want to make sure that we're planning, that we're making sure that we're planning ahead for the infrastructure for the growth of EVs, and finding that balance, in making sure that that infrastructure not only is prepared, but making sure that infrastructure, that we're not being too overly prepared and putting too much money into it. So something that I'm sure all the utilities are taking a look at, that type of thing. And then we want to make sure that our EV owners that have an increase in energy in their home are not impacting those who choose not to have an EV, like I said. Next slide. Now, we've really had some great opportunities. Every utility has, some commercial and industrial personnel, and these are really great resources. So even those of you who have municipalities, if there's co-ops next to you that have some C&I personnel, they can really lend some good best practices of how they're reaching into the business community, how they're partnering on development plans, their collaborative opportunities. They also help keep our commercial and industrial members updated on potential grant. So for example, our municipals municipalities that we support, you know, we're sending that school bus information to those school districts. We're getting those grant information to them as quickly as we can. Even if they're hearing it from other sources, we'd rather over communicate than under communicate. We can also provide education on energy savings programs. So we have lots of expertise that we can take into the school districts, into your community. We could be a partner in your community if you wanted to have a workshop. One of our benefits we've been doing is kind of an EV 101, where we're kind of going out into the community to Rotary clubs and city councils and chambers to really educate on the growth of EVs in our communities that we serve. Next slide. But one of the first things we wanted to do as a utility was we wanted to learn about EVs ourselves. So this was an opportunity for us to really delve into it as we increase our fleet. So we have two BEV models. We have the Tesla and the Ford Lightning, and that should be a Model Y Tesla, for those of you who are savvy on that. And then we have two PHEV vehicles. So our leadership team is able to drive those and learn. And I know I've learned a lot. I drive the Tesla, and I've learned quite a bit about just being an EV driver and participating in groups that support EV adoption. So the Minnesota Tesla Club, the Minnesota EV Owners Club, going to their meetings and really learning from other EV owners, as well as our EV owner members. We want to learn from them. What's their thought process when they're purchasing an EV? Who's purchasing EVs? We're doing some personas about who's purchasing EVs and what their thought process is and how they learn about them. So this is something that we're always doing here at Wright-Hennepin, is learning more about EVs. And I know, you know, in working with other communities, as they start to build their fleet, it really increases the knowledge of EVs that can help when you're out in the community by the city personnel and by those who are driving the fleet. Next slide. And then, as I mentioned, we're doing education and outreach, really getting into our communities. You know, one of our most important things is educating those leaders to ensure that when somebody purchases an EV, that they contact their utility. They don't need to memorize Wright-Hennepin's programs, because all the utilities have that message. There's always energy saving programs that helps get people charging their EVs off peak, which is, you know, creates the grid stability for all of us. This year we held an EV advisory meeting, and this was an opportunity to hear from our EV member owners. And it was kind of a la focus group. And we gathered so much information from them and so many good ideas. And we wanted to learn more about, you know, did they think to call their utility when they purchased their EV? How did they learn about their EVs? How did they find their electrician to get their EV home charging set up? Did they think to call their utility? Did they know about our programs? So this was a great opportunity to learn from them, and they gave us great ideas for how we can better communicate with them, and how we can better make sure that we are continue to incentivize them to charge during the off-peak times. We hold an annual ride and drive, and we partner with local auto dealers to bring in their cars and test drive. So that's always a popular event. This year we held our first EV 101, where we invited members who were interested in EVs to come, and we had some snacks. We had an electrician come and speak. We had the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association come and talk about pricing and availability across the state. So that was really successful. That allowed us to really gather our members to learn more about EVs. We also hold an annual public safety training, and we're going to hold it again in 2024. We held one in 2022. This was an opportunity for us to bring in training for firefighters and emergency personnel on the difference in fighting a fire with an EV. So that's a great opportunity to bring in and learn more about, kind of debunk the myths, I guess, about EVs just all of a sudden starting fire. And being in fire underneath the water, that kind of thing. So that's something that we'll offer in 2024, and we encourage you, if you have anybody from your cities that want to come, they don't have to be in our member service area. We would love to have you. We're out in the community. We're finding ways to get out into the community to educate not only members, but anyone who might be interested in EV. So that's where we're able to take our Tesla and our Lightning and kind of have people look at it and learn more about it. So it's just a great way for us to get out into the community. We also started an auto dealer and contractor referral program. So we incentivize auto dealers and electricians who refer members to get on a program. Again, we can save the members money, and it's just they might not know about it. So this helps with force multipliers who are out there in the community and who are talking about EVs, to encourage them to contact their utility and see what kind of cost saving measure there will be. Oh, I'll also add, I see Annie's on here from St. Louis Park. I'll also add that I know Annie did an EV 101, and so sharing those best practices, like anything cooperative or anybody, any utility would be happy to share best practices with you on what works and what doesn't if you're doing outreach in your community to bring people together to educate them. Next slide. At Wright-Hennepin, we've been really working through our marketing team to educate. This is on all energy programs we do this, but I'm just showing you our EV related ones. So it's just a great opportunity to educate. We are finding, or we weren't surprised by our members from our EV advisory meeting that they like to do their homework online. They don't need to call and talk to somebody. They want to do their homework about their vehicle purchase online. And so we want to make sure that we're educating them on our programs online as well, and providing that good information through all of our communication venues that we have. Next slide. Also at Wright-Hennepin, we've been really, really working hard on offering some flexibility. We continue to hear flexibility from our members. So we have 3 off-peak charging programs. We have a storage program, which is only overnight. We have a time of use program where they pay the variety of, depending on the time. And then we just started a subscription program where they could just pay $35 a month charging. So this allows us to give some flexibility to our members, again, to encourage them to get on a home charging energy savings program, but to allow them to choose what works best for their household. Next slide. And with our 2 EV owner member meetings, as I said, we held that advisory meeting, which was really good in-person feedback, and we held the EV 101 meeting. So next slide. In the EV advisory meeting, again, it was a really good opportunity to really hear from our members. And we are going to continue, this might not be an annual thing, but I tell you, this was a great opportunity to hear from people on the front line who had EVs, that these all were EV owners, and they're all members of Wright-Hennepin. And it not only to gain insight, but to hear from those who are choosing not to be on a home charging program, why they don't want to be on a home charging program. So, some things we can't really do anything about, like somebody who's just leasing a car and doesn't want to get on a program because they just want to try it out for a year or something like that. So there's some things we can't do anything about, but then also we learned some things, like we wanted, they wanted more ways to sign up for our program online instead of having to speak with someone, because right now they have to speak to one of our salespeople. So that was good learning. Like they want to be able to do everything online. That's the new way of, transactions now. Not only generational, but just people who tend to purchase EVs. They do everything online now. So it's just a really great opportunity for them to continue that mode of communicating and getting information. Next slide. Then what what we wanted to do with our EV 101 was connect with those future owners, to educate them, to get them to see, to learn about our programs. And what was really neat is we invited other members who had EVs, and they were wonderful. Like, you could hear the conversations going, you know, what do you think about your car? What are lessons learned? That type of thing. So it was a great way. This is a meeting that we will continue to have annually for sure. It was a great way to educate potential owners. Next slide. Then we're really partnering in our communities, not only in our service area at Wright-Hennepin, but around our service area where we know our members are purchasing their automobiles, is really getting connections with auto dealers and making sure the salespeople are knowing that they need to, you know, encourage people to contact their utility. So that's really important. In the past, a salesperson didn't have to speak with a purchaser about all the gas stations that were out there. You know, so that's just a new concept. So we've been really building relationships with the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association. We had cards made and window clings where a purchaser could look up their utility and see what their programs are. Again, not just having an auto dealer memorize all of Wright-Hennepin's programs, but direct them to where MinnesotaCharging.org, where they can find their program that's right for them and with their utility. So it's a great opportunity to do that. And then the Minnesota legislature just passed law to have all the auto dealers have EV certified person on site. So we'll be helping support that with our member dealer outreach as well. Oh, thank you, Lindsay. MinnesotaCharging.org. Yeah. Our QR code from our window clings and our cards go right there, so they can just find their utility. Okay, next slide. Then we've also have worked with the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association to really to partner. And what this has allowed us to do also is to hear about EV sales in the state. You know, kind of what's happening, what's the latest and greatest, what's selling, what's not, what's kind of slowing down. So this has been a good partnership to make sure, and we literally have identified 81 auto dealers in our service area or around that we've just really reached out to, and that want to partner on you know, being knowledgeable about utility programs and encouraging a purchaser to contact their utility. Next slide. Now, with our contractor outreach is really reaching those electricians and finding those electricians who are really savvy in getting EV home charging set up in a reputable, you know, way, that type of thing. So we bring the contractors in annually to update them on our programs. We have a referral program that we're going to expand next year, where they get a monetary incentive if someone that they set up home charging for calls us and gets on a program. And we are always sending newsletter communication to our service providers to make sure that they know what we're doing and to encourage them. And surprisingly enough, we had some electricians at the beginning of this year that even were like, gee, I never even thought to, you know, have them connect to their utility and get on a program. So it's really helped us to outreach to them and educate them. And then the last slide I have is really just kind of a summary. I just wanted to kind of share some of our best practices. You know, we're really trying to prepare and stay up on EV initiatives. I think I forgot to add one of the things we're even considering, because our EV advisory group was so successful, we're even considering in 2024 starting like an EV car club with our membership and doing something with that, so we can have a continuous connection to those EV owner members and continue to get feedback from them, not only about our programs, but what they're hearing out on the front lines about owning an EV and the kinds of programs that would be flexible for them for home charging and encourage home charging. So we're continuing to build relationship with stakeholders like Great Plains Institute and Drive Electric have been great. All the ones you guys listed here as partners, I was writing them down. I'm like, oh yeah, we have all those as partners that help us with our outreach and help us with our communication at our utility here. So we're just doing a lot of outreach and community education in our service area. And I'd be happy if, I don't know if there's time for questions, Lindsay, or anybody else have some good best practices that they've had with outreach?
Yes, thank you, Annette, so much for that wonderful presentation. I knew some of what Wright-Hennepin was doing, but I didn't quite realize the extent of all the like varied and robust partnerships that you've been building. So I appreciate you sharing that information with us. I am going to stop sharing my screen because I think we do have time for questions, discussion. So I would encourage anyone who's on the call, as you're able, to turn on your camera for this portion. And if you have questions for either of our presenters, Mackenzie or Annette, feel free to either unmute yourself or you can throw it in the chat and we will verbalize it for you. So I'll pause for a minute if people have questions. Otherwise, I do have some myself, but I want to make sure that you all get your questions answered.
Question. I was curious to hear a little more about the firefighter, the annual public safety training and how that's been going. That has become a concerning topic between our fire staff. And I think they have a lot of concern in St. Louis Park, especially as we're putting in more EV charging in like multifamily buildings and parking garages and such. I think there's just like a lot of hesitancy. And yeah, it's just been a growing issue. So I was just curious how the trainings have been going and what the reactions have been like, and if you have any tips for like communicating around the kind of safety precautions.
I will have to send, I forgot who it was training from another state that we brought in, and I can't think of the name of it right off the top of my head, but I attended ours and the one at Candy, Ojai County Cooperative, and it was very informative just about the things they should keep in mind, myth busting of, you know, what happens to EVs, you know, a lot of myth busting. And you know, the firefighters got, you know, credit, their training credits for it. I don't know what that's called, or CR or whatever those are called. So it was just a great training, and we brought it in, and a lot of the co-ops have been doing it, and it wasn't just for members. So I think, you know, now that we have this city kind of consortium here, you know, definitely something that we want to get out through you guys as well to spread the word, because anybody's welcome to attend, and it did not cost any. There was no cost to it. The co-op paid in both the situations that I have here, and Great River Energy used some funding for it too as well. But I can send some more. I'll send some more information to Lindsay about who that was and a little bit. I think there's a YouTube on their training too, so I'll send that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. And we'll make sure and get that out to the group as a whole and post it on the EV Smart website. Annette, I have a question for you about, so for communities that are on the call that might want to either start up a relationship with the utility to talk about EVs and EV programs and whatnot, or maybe they're looking to improve their relationship that they have with the utility, what advice would you give the communities?
Well, definitely, the commercial and industrial personnel at the utilities would be a great place to start. They're doing a lot of outreach, and Excel Energy, they have a lot of community outreach people in each region, that type of thing. That would be willing to help and make that first contact. So that would be very few have community relations people that I have found, but usually the C&I personnel kind of fill that role within a utility. And even if you're a municipal and you have your own utility, but there's some co-ops around you, I highly encourage you to, you know, contact them and hear some of the best practices of some of the things they're doing. In the services they would be happy to provide, I'm sure, like training or that type of thing.
Great. Well, and I think I had said this earlier, but I didn't quite realize the extent of all the different partnerships that you were building up at Wright-Hennepin. And so maybe your utility is also building up those partnerships that if you link in with them, then you have access to like partnerships that the utility has been developing, engaging. And so I think that would be really interesting. I want to leave space for people to ask their questions. I think partnerships are super important and they take a lot of time and effort to build up, but very important. So if anyone has questions, I'll pause for a moment, but I have additional questions as well.
I would say, you know, something I'm learning, I'll probably get a chuckle here, and I don't mean to offend, but, you know, we've been kind of outreach and talking about our programs, and my initial outreach was to kind of get to city leaders, like through a city council meeting, and kind of update them on what we're doing and get force multipliers to be out in the community to, you know, encourage anyone that has an EV to contact their utility, that type of thing. And I haven't had great luck with the city councils being as receptive. Again, I don't mean to offend anybody, but being as receptive to our message. But you know where I found the partners is the Rotary clubs and the chambers. The business community has been, not only has this been a topic of interest for them, it seems, but it also has been, you know, they're really out in the community. They can talk up your program. They can help get partners in the community. So that's just something that I've learned. And I've really kind of am sticking to that for 2024 is really those Rotary clubs and those small business organizations and getting them informed about what we're doing. And they are very receptive to that.
And Annie just put a comment in the chat about commissions being more receptive potentially as well. Annette, I had a question speaking about dealerships, because that's one thing that we encourage as a part of the EV Smart program is to work with the utility to reach out to your dealerships and help them be aware of the different programs that are available and to educate their customers about the different programs and tax incentives and whatnot that are available to them. Could you just detail a bit more about like how, like, were they receptive? How that engagement with the dealerships occurred?
Sure. So like I said, we identified 81 dealers who sold EVs in or around our service area. So our intention was to, you know, kind of create a contact for each of those. Well, that was a great intention, but it didn't work because of the difference in receptivity to us from the dealers. So there definitely was a range of dealers who are ready to have that conversation and ready to partner, and those who just are not right now. And they have a lot coming at them from, you know, their manufacturers to that type of thing. So I totally get it. So what I decided to do last year is play with the ones who wanted to play. And that was my decision. So I made 12 that I really had developed great relationships with, where I'm regularly, quarterly, so 4 times a year, I bring donuts to their sales team. I have breakfast with their sales team. It's helpful for me because I get to learn about EV sales, what's happening, what's coming down the pike from their OEM, those kinds of things. So that's been really, really helpful just to build that relationship. And then also tell them about what we're doing and about our program. So it's a great beneficial relationship. But I had to early on decide, I'm just gonna choose the ones and work with those and then grow from there. So that's been something that we'll do in 2024 is grow from the 12 that we had, even though the 81 are still getting, you know, some occasional correspondence from me, and agreed to put our cards out and our window clings out. Whether or not they're doing it or not, I don't know. But the 12 have really been kind of our key, and then I'll expand that. But it is difficult. And I just spoke with Peter Johns from Excel, who does this as a full-time job, auto dealer relationships as a full-time job. And he admits it's a struggle. The sales managers change frequently. The salespeople are, you know, don't always want to talk to you when sales aren't high on EVs. They want to talk about something else. So it's a constant relationship that I have to keep up. I have found that, and he acknowledged that with Excel too, that they have to do that too. It's an ever-changing business, so it's a relationship that you have to kind of continue to have.
Well, and Annie, I apologize. I guess I didn't read far enough down onto your comment that you do have a question. Do you want to ask it of Annette?
I do not have a question. I was just kind of referencing if any cities, like along with the commission point, yes, if any cities, which maybe Annette, you've already kind of covered this path with the city council, but I'm just thinking, like in St. Louis Park, we have our Environment and Sustainability Commission, and that welcomes guest speakers and usually pretty receptive. So that might be one path to explore if you haven't already. But thanks, Rebecca, for following up.
Yeah. Sorry, misunderstood. I'm off my game today, I guess. So Annette, one other question that I had related to your EV 101 events that you have with the different community organizations is, do you reach out to them, or do you find that they're reaching out to you for that information, or how does that partnership work?
We have been, because this has been such a concentrated effort for us, we have been reaching out to them. And, you know, at our co-op, we have the luxury of having a position like mine that's really my full-time position, where other co-ops don't always have that luxury. There's someone else that's doing, you know, the outreach and building relationships, that kind of thing. That's a very minute part of their job. So that was important enough to Wright-Hennepin to really form this position. I just joined about a year and a half ago to really form this position. So it's just been about a year's work of just really finding those partners. And then because we're small, we want force multipliers. We don't need to become the experts on certain things, you know, how to put a home charging station. And, you know, that's why we build the relationship with electricians. You know, and we want to learn, we want to be ahead of the times of what's selling in Minnesota and what kind of EVs are selling and how are they finding them. So that's where our relationship with the auto dealers really comes into play. And then getting into the communities with the business community has really allowed us to, you know, educate community influencers who are out in the community that can help spread our message as well.
Great. Well, we just have a few minutes left here. So if there's any burning question that any of you have, feel free to throw it in the chat. Otherwise, I do want to share, we have some two quick slides at the end of our presentation just to kind of wrap up this event. So as always, we will be sending out a follow-up email that will have links to the recording of this webinar, as well as the different resources that were discussed today. And keep an eye out for that as well. We always post everything onto the EV Smart website, so feel free to take a look at that as well. it's a really good source for all of the webinars, all of the resources, all of the materials that we have as a part of this program. And I do want to give a really big thank you to both Mackenzie and Annette for joining us today and sharing your expertise on partnerships. It's an essential piece to the puzzle of accelerating EV adoption within our communities, and something that I think, as we've been hearing, takes some time and effort, but can produce some valuable outcomes. So if you have any questions from today's webinar, or just in general, feel free to reach out to anyone on our team here at GPI, or if you have questions for Annette, and I hope you don't mind if I funnel those questions to you, but I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I did just notice that Mackenzie put in the chat the link to the registration for the webinar about the electric school bus lunch and learn. So check that out as well. But thank you all for joining us today on partnerships and EVs.